They laughed at her silence, mocked her every day like it meant she was weak. But what they didn't see, what they never even bothered to ask, was that Jade Kim carried a skill that could dismantle everything they thought they knew, without saying a single word. The morning announcements buzzed through the aging intercom system of Ridgewell High as students flooded into the central hallway, swapping jokes, dragging backpacks, and jostling lockers open. Jade Kim, 17, kept to the edges. Her oversized black hoodie and scuffed Converse made her look like a shadow drifting between worlds. In one hand, she clutched a sketchbook, faded, battered, and stuffed with drawings she never showed anyone. To most students, Jade barely existed. She didn't join clubs, didn't speak unless called on, didn't even eat in the cafeteria. She wasn't new, but she might as well have been invisible. Since freshman year, Jade had learned to survive Ridgewell by blending into the background, never making eye contact, and avoiding every spotlight. That was fine with her. People didn't know her story, and she preferred it that way. They didn't know she lived with her grandmother in a 2-bedroom apartment behind the laundromat, or that she'd lost both parents when she was 10. They didn't know she spent every night drawing until her hand ached, not because it was a hobby, but because it was the only thing that helped keep the noise inside her head quiet. Jade was used to people underestimating her. Teachers overlooked her. Classmates whispered behind her back. Even the guidance counselor once asked if she had any real interests besides, doodling. But Jade didn't need anyone to understand her. She had one thing no one else at Ridgewell could see coming, and soon they'd find out. It had been 3 years since Jade had walked through Ridgewell High's heavy front doors, but each day still felt like her first, unseen, uninvited, and utterly alone. Her father, once a renowned digital artist, had passed away when she was 10. Her mother followed 2 years later, leaving Jade to be raised by a grandmother who barely spoke English and worked nights to keep the lights on. They moved to Ridgewell for a fresh start, but Jade quickly learned that fresh starts didn't come easily when you didn't fit into a box. She was the girl who never spoke unless called on, who always sat near the back, head down, sketching instead of scrolling. To most of her classmates, she was either a blank space or a target, depending on their mood. Her drawings, hyper-detailed portraits, abstract explosions of motion, even architectural blueprints were all kept locked away in her sketchbook like secrets. And in that silence, a belief formed around her that she was powerless, that Jade Kim didn't matter. No one bothered to ask what she did when she disappeared to the art room after school, or why her eyes moved the way a conductor's might when studying moving things. They just assumed she was weak, weird, or worse, harmless. But invisibility is often mistaken for absence, and that mistake was about to cost someone everything. By the time Jade was 8, she had already filled more sketchbooks than most people filled conversations. It wasn't just a love for drawing. It was obsession, devotion, escape. Her father had taught her the basics before he passed: shading, line weight, perspective. But after that, it was self-taught hunger. She didn't draw cartoons like the other kids her age. She drew mechanical schematics, muscle movement studies, wind flow diagrams, and things people swore couldn't come from someone her age. What no one at Ridgewell knew, what she never let anyone know, was that Jade had been quietly training under an anonymous digital mentor, a reclusive VR designer in Seoul who had discovered her work through a forgotten art forum and offered to teach her skills in visual mapping, physics-based motion planning, and neuro-reactive design. They met online every weekend for hours. She wasn't just drawing anymore. She was building simulated worlds and testing kinetic responses in real-time engines. Jade had been developing what her mentor called visual mind mapping, the ability to deconstruct motion, anticipate trajectories, and respond with exactness. In simpler terms, she saw things before they happened. Her mind, wired for flow and reaction, became a tool of precision. While other kids were learning how to pass chemistry, she was learning how to reverse engineer a fight, memorize human movement patterns, and digitally simulate dozens of outcomes before a punch could ever land. But none of it was ever used in the real world. Not once. Jade had promised herself, and more importantly her grandmother, that she would never resort to confrontation. That her skills were for creation, not destruction. Her grandmother didn't understand the tech, but she understood grief, and she had made Jade promise. Your gift is for beauty, not revenge. So Jade tucked it away. She buried that part of herself so deep that even she sometimes forgot it was there. When people mocked her silence, she took it. When they shoved past her in the halls, she absorbed it. When they whispered in class that she was autistic or glitched, she drew through it. Every insult got stored away, just like every movement she witnessed. She could recall from memory the exact way Brielle Wallace flicked her hair when she laughed, the weight shift in Derek's shoulders when he was about to push someone, or the precise moment when Nolan Reyes, the worst of them, looked around to make sure a teacher wasn't watching before he struck. She watched, always learning, and every movement, every expression was getting filed into her subconscious, building a map of the chaos she walked through every day. And Jade, she was starting to forget why she was staying quiet. Because while she had promised to use her gift for beauty, every day it became harder to ignore the truth. Silence was starting to feel like surrender. Brielle Wallace was the kind of girl people noticed before she even entered the room. Her voice could cut through any hallway chatter, and her laugh, sharp, rehearsed, unmistakable, was a soundtrack that played on repeat through Ridgewell High. She wasn't the school bully in the traditional sense. She was worse. Brielle was the curator of cool, the influencer with 14K local followers, the one who decided who sat where, who got invited, and who disappeared socially without a trace. But her power didn't come from physical threats. It came from the careful precision with which she controlled people's reputations. Her minions, yes, that's what people called them, were Derek, the varsity track star with zero empathy and a perfect jawline, Nolan Reyes, a smooth-talking junior with a streak of malice behind his grin, and Tessa Long, Brielle's content manager, who recorded everything and was known for turning hallway drama into viral moments under the guise of just entertainment. Together, they didn't just rule Ridgewell, they choreographed it. If you caught their attention, it was only ever a matter of time before your worst moment became everybody's morning entertainment. And Jade, she'd been a background character in their story for years, until she made the mistake of winning an art competition that Brielle's younger sister had also entered, and lost. That was all it took. Suddenly, Jade's silence wasn't just weird, it was creepy. Her hoodie wasn't just oversized, it was disgusting. Her notebook became obsession fuel. Her drawings were mocked online under vague captions like, "What happens when you raise kids without social skills?" And Nolan made it his personal mission to break her code. To him, Jade was a challenge, an enigma who didn't flinch, didn't engage, and didn't offer them the satisfaction of seeing her crack. That only made them push harder. Tessa filmed her eating alone in the courtyard and added audio of crickets chirping. Derek once stole her pencil bag and dumped it out in front of the entire class, declaring, "Look, she's got a serial killer's toolkit." And Brielle never got her hands dirty. She didn't have to. All it took was one post, one look, one offhand remark to her army, and the signal would ripple through the school. Jade wasn't just targeted. She was declared non-human. What made it worse was that teachers, while occasionally sympathetic, didn't dare cross Brielle. Her father sat on the school board and her mother ran the biggest real estate company in town. Even the guidance counselor seemed to tread carefully, once suggesting to Jade, "Maybe if you tried smiling more, it would be easier." Jade didn't smile. Not because she didn't want to, but because everything inside her was focused on staying composed, on honoring her promise, on surviving one more day without reacting. But deep down, beneath the silence and the forced stillness, something in her had started shifting. Because while Brielle and her clique ran Ridgewell High like a show, Jade had started to feel like she was done playing the part they wrote for her. Laughter rippled through the room like wildfire. "Are you building a murder simulation?" Derek sneered. "She's probably going to upload our names to some revenge app." Jade sat down wordlessly, her knuckles white around the edge of her desk. Her ears buzzed, not from embarrassment anymore, but from something else, a low, pulsing hum of restraint unraveling. After class, Nolan cornered her in the stairwell, smug and unafraid. "You know," he said, leaning too close, "you should thank us. At least you're not invisible anymore." He poked her sketchbook with his finger. "What's in there today? Another kill plan?" Jade didn't flinch. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, Nolan hesitated. Her eyes weren't angry, they were calculating, as if she was already 10 steps ahead, seeing a blueprint of every move he'd ever make. "You're lucky," she said quietly. "You're not interesting enough to make the page." He blinked. That was the first time she had spoken to him directly, and something about the way she said it, calm, cool, like he wasn't even a threat, unnerved him. That night, Jade lay on her bed staring at the ceiling, sketchbook unopened beside her. Her grandmother was at work. The apartment was quiet, but her mind was louder than it had ever been. The line had been crossed, and for the first time she was beginning to understand something her mentor once told her. Some designs are never meant to stay on the page. Some are made for motion, for impact. That night, Jade didn't draw. She planned. The next morning, Jade dressed differently. She didn't swap her hoodie for something flashy, no, she still wore black. But this time it was a sleek zip-up, tighter to the frame, one that let her move with freedom. She pulled her hair back into a tight ponytail, no strands falling in her eyes, no more hiding. Her grandmother had left early for her custodial shift at the hospital, unaware that Jade had barely slept, too busy rehearsing a sequence of decisions. It wasn't a plan for revenge, it was something deeper, more precise, a realignment of intention. That morning she looked into the mirror and told herself the same phrase she'd written in the margins of a forgotten notebook years ago. Control is the highest form of strength. When she arrived at Ridgewell, the energy around her felt different. People were still whispering, still pointing. The video was still circulating, still growing traction. But Jade was no longer shrinking from it. She walked through the hallway with poise, not arrogance, not fury, but the stillness of someone who had chosen her moment. In first period calculus, she didn't doodle in the margins. She watched. In second period bio, she mapped exit routes in her mind, not out of fear, but precision. And by third period, when she passed Brielle's usual perch near the east courtyard, she paused for just half a second, long enough for Brielle to notice. "Look who finally decided to look up," Brielle said, voice sugary, sarcastic. "You sure you're okay?" We've been worried. The word we echoed with manufactured concern. Nolan snorted. Tessa raised her phone. Jade didn't respond. She simply tilted her head slightly, as if to memorize their spacing, their body language, their rhythm. And then she walked away. She spent lunch not in the library, but in the auditorium's backstage utility room where no one went. It was dark, dust-covered, quiet, and it gave her space to focus. She pulled out her tablet, connected it to a motion map simulation app, and began building, not a weapon, a performance. Every frame was timed to sound cues, and every cue was triggered by movement, an experimental project she had kept buried for months. Her fingers flew. She mapped Brielle's smirk, Nolan's habitual shoulder slouch, Tessa's camera angles. She timed them, simulated responses, adjusted flows. She wasn't fantasizing, she was rehearsing, because she knew now that the only way to rewrite the narrative was not to destroy them, but to reveal what they were in front of everyone else. Her mentor had once told her, "You don't fight power head-on. You redirect it until it collapses on itself." That's what Jade was going to do. Not with fists, not with rage. The next 48 hours were meticulous. Jade skipped after-school clubs, declined her mentor's weekly check-in, and even ignored a text from her grandmother asking if she wanted to watch old Korean dramas together that night. Instead, she worked. In the privacy of her room, lights low, stylus in hand, tablet screen glowing, she built what she now called the projection. It wasn't a revenge video. It was a full sensory simulation built to reveal frame by frame what Brielle and her crew had done for months. The social manipulation, the isolation, the disguised cruelty wrapped in smiles and phone filters. She didn't doctor footage, she simply sequenced it. All of it was public. Every clip they posted, every hallway ambush Tessa uploaded for laughs, every story screenshot. But Jade layered them with context, timing them to silence, overlaying whispers with captions like, "Look how well she hides it," and "Watch who's laughing and who's filming." Then, using a second app her mentor had trained her in, a digital projection software used in AR exhibitions, she built a mock hallway scene, one where silhouettes acted out what her classmates had lived through. But instead of being anonymous, she labeled every figure with the real usernames they used to spread it, not to shame, to show, to let people see what it looked like when the cruelty wasn't hidden behind filters or group chats, to make the audience feel what it meant to be someone like her, watched, dismissed, then publicly ripped apart without ever being spoken to. She timed it all to music, nothing dramatic, just a slow piano loop with a growing pulse. The emotional build wasn't explosive, it was haunting. And when the final frame faded into black, a single sentence remained. "This is not a story about a victim. This is a story about what happens when you stop watching and start seeing." She didn't upload it online. She didn't leak it through a burner account. Jade submitted it, quietly, and without fanfare, to Mr. Dunlap, the multimedia tech teacher, as her unofficial submission for the Spring Arts Showcase. She left no artist name, just a signature made of symbols in the bottom corner, her father's initials, hidden in the folds of a mechanical drawing. Mr. Dunlap, overwhelmed with submissions and half expecting another TikTok dance-inspired loop, clicked play without thinking and didn't breathe for 5 minutes. By the next morning, he had cleared it for screening at the closing of the showcase. That day, Jade walked through Ridgewell different, not with swagger, not with fear, but with a sense of quiet inevitability. Because in just 2 days, the entire school would gather in the auditorium for the annual arts event, expecting another forgettable slideshow of paintings and short films. But what they'd witness was a mirror, one she had built, line by line, frame by frame, one they wouldn't be able to unsee. And when that moment came, she wouldn't need to say a single word. The work would speak for itself, and for the first time, so would she. The Ridgewell High Spring Arts Showcase was usually background noise, an annual check-the-box tradition where parents politely clapped, students scrolled through their phones, and the art kids got 15 seconds of courtesy applause. But this year, the auditorium was unusually packed. Rumors had spread of a mysterious final submission. No listed artist, no title, just a file Mr. Dunlap had dubbed The Unseen. As the lights dimmed and the showcase neared its end, students whispered, curious, bored, expectant. Brielle sat in the front row with Tessa and Nolan, smirking as if the show was hers. Probably another tragic time lapse of leaves falling, she whispered. The screen flickered on. No intro, no logo, just a slow, grainy hallway shot. Then another. A locker slam synced to a heartbeat thump. A boy laughing in slow motion. A girl's voice, Brielle's, saying, "We're just making her visible." Laughter. Another clip. Tessa's video of Jade eating alone, now paired with a caption, "They call this a joke." Then Nolan's voice layered over footage of a classroom. "Careful, she might snap." The room grew silent. No music, just breathing, just moments, one by one. The camera panned to a digital hallway model, animated outlines walking in loops, passing a smaller figure whose name flickered between invisible, creepy, and target. The outline would stumble, books would fall, the crowd would laugh. Again, and again, and again. Then the overlays began. Real Ridgewell usernames flashing on screen as each piece of content played. People started shifting in their seats. A few phones dropped. Even the teachers stared, realizing this wasn't just digital art. This was documentation, exposure. The music finally entered. Soft, echoing piano with a slow build that crawled under the skin. As the final minute approached, the clips grew tighter, faster, layering each act of cruelty until it created a wave of suffocation. Then, black screen. One phrase. You saw it. You laughed. You shared it. What does that make you? The silence that followed was absolute. Then gasps. Brielle stood slowly, face flushed. "What the hell was that?" she blurted. "Who made that?" But no one answered. Tessa looked shaken, her phone still in her lap, screen dim. Nolan, for the first time in memory, didn't smile. Mr. Dunlap stepped up to the mic, stunned. "That concludes our showcase," he said, voice hoarse. "If the artist is in the room, I just want to say, thank you. That was real. That was necessary." The room began to stir. She turned and walked out without a word. But every head followed her. Every whisper carried her name. She didn't need to stay for applause or confrontation. That moment was hers. She had changed the narrative, not with shouting or vengeance, but with the most dangerous thing a so-called powerless girl could ever wield. Undeniable truth, revealed with precision. And just like that, everything shifted. By the time Jade arrived at school the next day, the unseen had already gone viral. Not just on Ridgewell's private student channel, but beyond. Someone had recorded the screening on their phone and uploaded it to TikTok with the caption, "When the quiet girl shows you everything you ignored." Within 24 hours, it hit over 200,000 views. Comments flooded in, not just from Ridgewell students, but from teens across the country who recognized the patterns. The performative bullying, the disguised cruelty, the way schools often ignored the quiet victims. Suddenly, Ridgewell High was under a spotlight it hadn't asked for. The principal called an emergency faculty meeting. The school counselor, who once told Jade to try smiling more, scheduled assemblies on emotional safety. And parents, many of whom had no idea how their children behaved in hallways, demanded answers. But the biggest shock came when Brielle's father, chair of the school board, was confronted at a town council meeting by reporters asking how his daughter became the centerpiece of a digital expose on bullying. That was the beginning of the unraveling. Brielle wasn't suspended, but her reputation took a blow no curated post could repair. Her influencer status plummeted, collaborations dropped, followers unfollowed. Tessa deleted her entire video archive and posted a shaky selfie video apologizing to anyone she had hurt for content, though most saw through it. Nolan, he tried to shrug it off, joke about it like he always did, but people no longer laughed. He transferred schools 2 weeks later. But the real shift wasn't in their downfall. It was in the hallways. Suddenly, people were more aware of what they said, how they said it, who they ignored. Teachers started listening more. Students who had once stayed silent began speaking up. And in the middle of it all, Jade, she didn't ask for praise. She didn't change her wardrobe or start giving speeches. She returned to her usual spot in the library, hoodie back on, tablet in hand. But now, people noticed her not with pity, with respect. Students who had never said a word to her asked for feedback on their art. A few even asked how she learned animation or motion mapping. Mr. Dunlap invited her to speak in his class. She declined at first, but then agreed to record a short video talking about digital storytelling and how to speak without speaking. When it played, the classroom was silent. She didn't need to call anyone out by name. The art had done that. Quietly, completely, and effectively. The administration offered her a position as a student mentor for visual media projects, an unprecedented move. She accepted, but asked for one condition, that every student, no matter their background or GPA, could submit work without a name. Let the work speak, she said, and they listened. Because Jade Kim, the girl once ignored, had changed the school, not through power plays or popularity, but through something far more enduring: clarity. She had taken their mockery and transformed it into a message no one could forget. 6 months later, Ridgewell High felt like a different place. Not perfect, not without its cliques and conflicts, but changed in subtle, permanent ways. Posters about social accountability and digital ethics hung in the halls, not school-issued but student-designed. One of them featured an animated silhouette sitting alone at a lunch table, slowly surrounded by outlines of others sitting beside them. At the bottom were 3 words: "We see you." Jade didn't design that one, but she recognized the art style. It was from Mariah, a freshman who used to cry in the nurse's office every other week, and now led Ridgewell's first student-run digital storytelling club. Jade had become the unofficial mentor, not because she asked for it, but because people came to her, quietly, respectfully. Her story had rippled into theirs, and her digital simulation, the unseen, was now used as part of a district-wide training module for staff and students, anonymously credited per her request. Every so often, someone would approach her in the hallway, not to idolize her but to share a truth. That video, it made me think of my sister. Or, I used to say things without realizing what they meant. Or even, I'm sorry, I laughed once, I didn't know. Jade never offered judgment, just a small nod. That was enough. Her mentor from Seoul had sent her a message weeks after the showcase went viral. You've created a kinetic narrative that doesn't just move, but moves others. I couldn't be prouder. Jade had since been invited to contribute to a youth-focused media exhibit in Vancouver and had been awarded a national scholarship for digital innovation. She still walked the halls with her hoodie on, still sat in the library, still spent nights mapping motion, sketching layers, editing with headphones on. But now, her art wasn't about hiding. It was about revealing, about building, about connection. Her grandmother, once fearful that Jade's skills might only bring her pain, had started taping printouts of local articles on the fridge, underlining Jade's name in highlighter with tears in her eyes. And Jade, quiet, calculating, powerful Jade, finally understood something she hadn't been ready to see before, that what people thought was powerless was never about a lack of strength. It was a refusal to waste energy on people too blind to recognize it. The skill she unleashed wasn't just visual mapping or digital storytelling. It was truth, framed so precisely, so undeniably that it couldn't be ignored or rewritten. And for every student still sitting silently in the back of a classroom, trying to survive the noise of their own life, Jade had become something unexpected. Not a hero, not a symbol, just proof that you don't have to raise your voice to change the story. You just have to write it on your own terms. And that, in the end, was the kind of power no one saw coming.